We are live on Facebook.
Good morning, everyone. Hearty welcome from Rotaract District 3131 and Rotary Club of Pune Hadapsar. We go with the session 5 of action, that is active congregation of talented, innovative and organized networks. We are glad to have Mr. Kunal R. Sarpal, who will be covering the topic of managing finance, legal compliance and marketing. Sir, we take this privilege to introduce you to the audience. Advocate Kunal is nationally recognized as a writer, trainer, speaker, and consultant on specialized corporate law subjects with startups, their funding, mergers and acquisitions, FEMA and RBI compliance, along with business structuring and advisory. He has been practicing company secretary from ICSI New Delhi, a lawyer from ILS Law College, and a graduate in commerce from Ness Wadia College of Commerce. He is the founder partner of White Collar Legal LLP, an award-winning multi-state law firm specializing in corporate and intellectual property law, and especially early-stage companies. He is one of the India's youngest practicing company secretaries, a routine expert speaker, and ambassador at the Ministry of Sports and Youth Affairs, and is also visiting faculty at Tata Institute of Social Science, Mumbai, among many others, wherein he primarily teaches law and entrepreneurship. A noted public speaker, he regularly presents keynote speeches at various corporates, educational institutions, and other private institutions. Has been past president and area director at Toastmasters International and has been regularly awarded at state and national levels for speaking. He has also been a TEDx speaker and is a polyglot, can speak 7 languages. He is also associated with organizations such as Teach for India and CFA Institute. We welcome you, sir. Thanks for taking out time for having a session with us. And we hope that your words would be inspiring for our young entrepreneurs of the district. Over to you, sir.
Yes. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the kind introduction. It is always a pleasure to address Rotarians. I was a Rotarian myself for a very brief period, and I enjoyed my time as I was a part of it. Today's topic, I'll be covering intellectual property also, since I speak from experience and expertise there. But to start with, let me cover fundamentally about compliance, marketing, branding, financial management, and all of that. Uh, when we talk about compliance, any kind of compliance, which is complying or filing certain forms, doing certain audits, running a business, even as an individual, when you are a salaried employee, there are a lot of compliances that you need to do. And in India, if you notice, people think that the compliance situation is not very good, but I would say it's very relaxed. Now that I work with people across the globe, I would say European laws are extremely, extremely stringent, and Indian laws basically are a little relaxed. And there are a couple of other flaws as well. In the first thing that you need to understand about compliances are it is going to increase year on year, and there are a lot of areas in India, for example, the western belt of India, which is the Gujarat, Rajasthan belt, where compliances are not done in spirit, they are done in letter. The difference between letter and spirit is more of it is done because if not done, there will be a notice, prosecution, penalty, and all of that. And therefore, businesses by themselves are not very compliant. This is a very different situation in different countries where there is a culture of compliance and otherwise. So, therefore, the first thing you need to understand, India is at a very nascent stage. As we become more innovative, as we become more competitive, if we want to raise more and more FDI, we have to become more compliant. Businesses have to structure themselves better. They have to basically have a very strong documentary trail in whatever they do. And as professionals, for those who are listening, your requirement, your relevance in the profession is just going to increase with time. Now, the main reason why these compliances are required, there are two main reasons. One is the government or any state in any parts of the government, they want to create two things. One is accountability, that businesses, since they use a lot of stakeholders, since they interact with a lot of stakeholders, there is some giving back kind of a mechanism. And second is transparency. People borrow money from the banks. They do so many transactions which involve public interest, public money. So there has to be some sort of a disclosure, some transparency, and therefore accountability and transparency is what drives compliance in all forms of uh, any kind of field. One specific area that was asked to me in terms of labor compliance, but I can speak for all. Take the company law, take labor laws, take family law, any laws you take, the ethos remains the same. It is very commonsensical. For example, if you start a factory, the government will tell you that you need to follow certain safety standards, you need to follow certain hygiene standards, you need to pay your employees on time, you need to compute your taxes on time, you need to ensure that interstate taxes are paid, filed, all of that. So basically it is a manual given by the government so that there is a uniformity in the kind of information collection and information reporting. So compliance is not just for creating a speed breaker, but it acts as a very good policy tool for the government, where the government can gain so much of data on so many businesses and so many individuals. Recently, if you notice that even though we had the pandemic and all of it, we just did better. We are at the same numbers as last year in terms of GST collections. So all this data comes from where? It comes from people filing their returns. And since the government has cracked down on a couple of things, the number of taxpayers, the number of people who file returns, they've increased. So that would be a so for anybody to understand a compliance in a particular area, for example, company law, you again need to ask yourself, what would common sense, what does a rational person do? So obviously, a rational person would, at the end, at quarterly or by yearly intervals, draw up your financials, report these financials, give a report to the bank maybe. So all of this is structured by the state in order to facilitate to all stakeholders. That's number two. Number three, now this is interesting. Most countries, okay, I would say Scandinavian countries and some European countries follow a carrot and stick policy when it comes to compliances or any kind of laws. Where if you are a good person, if you pay your taxes on time, if you don't have a criminal history, if you don't break the traffic signal, there will be some incentive. So a good person is incentivized. But in our country, we do not follow the carrot and stick policy. We follow the stick policy, where you are assumed to be a good person unless you miss your tax return, you have a criminal record, and in these cases your credit score will be affected, your standing in the society will be affected, the way penalties are imposed upon you will be affected, all of that will happen. And therefore, if you look at from a compliance mindset, it's essential that you understand that we live in a country which is acquisitorial, which is a stick policy, not the carrot policy. Now, the fourth point about compliance would be that it happens in two ways. One is which is a routine annual based compliances, where if you're a company, you need to comply with income tax, register of companies, RBI. Depends on what your activities are and what is the range of the transactions you do. And these can be annual compliances, where annually, irrespective of how much profit you do, loss you do, you just reach break even or you don't do any business, you need to file certain returns, you need to undertake a certain certifications, do a few audits and all of that. And in case of uh, non-annual, you have a lot of event-based compliances. For example, you do certain major foreign investment transaction, or you hire or demote a person from a different country. All of that will come under event-based compliance. So compliance can be both, annual plus event-based. The more active your company, the more transactions it's doing, the faster it's growing. All of that will amount to how much you need to comply. And obviously, this should have been in a staggered approach, and it is in a staggered approach. So if you look at how compliances are structured, the bigger you become, the more public money you use, the more investors you serve, the more shareholders you have, the higher will be your compliance, and therefore the highest number of compliances or return filing requirements, audit requirements are number one with listed companies, because listed companies use excessive public money. So many shareholders. Look at a company like Reliance, they fill the 1 KD stadium. So for the government to protect so many shareholders, it has to make sure that accountability and transparency is at the max, followed by public companies, followed by private companies, followed by small businesses. I'm very happy to know that there's a big reforms coming now, like in GST, for example, where from 28 returns, we are at 4 returns now. It is going to be self-certification, in my opinion. And just like in the US, in the next, I think, 5 to 10 years, businesses up to 1, 5, 10 crores will have to give their own returns. They don't have to rely on a chartered accountant or a lawyer. So this time is going to come soon, where compliance again becomes a cultural aspect. So in India, if I have to say, from a spirit point of view, there are very few companies that comply in spirit. For example, there is Wipro, which had a CSR policy even before CSR was introduced as a law. Or if you look at Infosys, which had a sweat equity policy even before sweat equity was a term. Now it is very popular thanks to the startup culture, but earlier it was not very popular. So all these companies show that you did not wait for a law to be more compliant, to be more accountable, to be more transparent. You can always do that on your own volition. So that would be a good fundamental around compliance. I'll talk more about compliance when I talk about IP. The second part I want to now move to is the part of marketing and branding. And this is the hottest topic now. Even at all the colleges I teach at Flame, at Symbiosis, at others, you will notice that the digital marketing specialization holds specific importance, a lot of importance. And people love using these tools, right, for SEO and for other mediums. Even as we speak, it's going on Facebook and you will boost it and all of that. So I have some fundamental principles about marketing and more around branding. So the first is, if you understand what brand is, from a valuation perspective, it is something that's extremely important. Not confusing it with goodwill or reputation. A brand is an independent asset of your own. In a company terms, a brand can be valued, can be sold, bought, assigned, all of that. A typical example would be the Chitle brand, where you can buy the entire Chitle outlet and the brand will cost you 200 crores in itself. So the brand can have massive reputation as a company, as an entity, and as an individual, a brand serves as a reputation tool. It is basically what you associate the person with. For example, when people hear my name in the profession, it is now synonymous with white collar, it is synonymous with intellectual property. It is sometimes in the past it was synonymous with Toastmasters. Before that, it was synonymous with something else. And therefore, brand is dynamic. Two people, if you notice in terms of branding, two contrasting people. You look at Mr. Tata on one hand, whose brand is a person who is an industrialist rather than a businessman, a person who is driven by a larger serving society mindset than profit, and a person who puts his corporate career and his Tata values above himself, which explains that how he did not focus much on his personal life and all of that. And on the other hand, you have people like Mr. Vijay Mallya, where what comes to your mind when you first think of Vijay Mallya is a person who defrauded the government, is now being put under the process of extradition and all of that. A similar brand reputation is enjoyed by companies as well. So if you look at Tata Group also, the immediate logic is that, okay, it's a value-driven company. It is very compliant. It maybe does not compensate its employees well, but it is a very humane company, which also explains the fact about how Tata does not close companies that are not profitable. Like the Nano sold, I think, one car last year, but the plant at Jamshed Nagar is still going strong because I think 5,000 people are employed there. Tata says we will export it to other countries, but we will not close. The main difference between why Cyrus Mistry and he had a fallout. On the other hand, if you look at a company like Reliance, although I invest in Reliance and I consider it as a very good wealth generator, if you look at the brand Reliance has built, It's a bit, a ruthless company, a company that's good at lobbying, a company that is a hard paymaster. People who have worked at Reliance talk about how the work culture is a bit toxic and the targets that are given to you are insane. So all of that. So all this builds your brand. One thing, since the demographic of the audience today is young, one clarity you need to have on branding is not built through your communication or through words. It is built through actions. It is built through very simple, consistent, repetitive messages. One of the great branding, two companies I would say who are acing branding in a big way is one is Domino's and the other is Nike. If you look at Domino's, for example, it's very easy to associate Domino's with 30 minutes, good pizza, cheap, whatever. And the same thing is worked across the world for Domino's. If you look at Nike as well, Nike enjoys monopoly share in a market which is not very innovative. If you look at shoes the way they were 20 years back and the way they are now, I would say a lot of a little bit form differences here and there, maybe aesthetic differences, but more or less a shoe is a shoe. It's not changed so much, but still Nike dominates. Which brings me to a very important point here, that a brand is successful when it comes from a why point, not just a what point. Now, this is known as the golden circle theory of branding, which talks about that if a person asks you that, Kunal, tell me about yourself, you need to start with why. If you start with what, say that, okay, I'm running a law firm and we're into intellectual property, it's not very inspiring. If I ask Nike, tell me about yourself, and if Nike says I make shoes, it's not interesting. Most of the people, 80, 85, 90% talk about what. Everybody talks at what level. What is not inspiring, what is not impactful, what does not stick, and therefore what should be avoided. Bata uses what? Bata talks about we have a new shoe collection and all of that. And Bata does not inspire. If you go one level up, there are companies who talk about how level marketing. Now, how is very interesting because how does not talk about what my product is. It talks about how it helps you. For example, Skechers will say one level up from Bata, it will say that run naturally, right? Run like you were born to run naturally. And the moment you say, I want to run naturally, Skechers is like, are you sure? You said yes. Then Skechers will say, buy our shoe. So the product comes after the how is clear. This is a bit better than what. It is impactful, but not to a certain extent. It is okay. I would say 8% in the world use the how standard, where if I ask you, tell me about yourself, we'll talk about how you do what you do, basically. Now, the meat or the main important point here is why. Now, if you look at a company like Nike or you look at a company like Apple, they never productize. The marketings are not driven by a product, especially during Steve Jobs era. He talked always about let's bring the future to you today. We will give you the future technologies today. Next is what? Think different. It's a very ideology driven company. And when I say that I'm going to give, bring future and give it to you today, most of the Apple fanatics, the consumers would be like, yes, I want that future today. Then Apple will say, according to us, this product is basically future today. And people buy it. People buy it by queuing up in lines. People buy it by selling their kidneys in China. This is actually happening, and people just go crazy about Apple products. Honestly, if you ask me, since I am into the patenting area, in terms of technology, it's not much superior. But yeah, I mean, Apple is still enjoying that kind of monopoly. If you look at Nike also, Nike never talks about the product. Look at any Nike ad, you will never see shoes going here and there. Nike will talk about reach peak performance or be GOAT, greatest of all time. Or do, so it talks about what you need to achieve from the product. And people who are very good at marketing, people who are good at branding, people who are good at communicating a message, understand this and therefore focus on the why of it rather than the what and the how. And therefore, to sum up branding in a fundamental way would be that all of us should start speaking from why more. Now coming to the topic of financial management or money management, just to keep it extremely simple. This feels almost like an MBA that's compressed in maybe 2 hours, a 22-year MBA. Financial management is nothing to do with how good you are in numbers. I am a testament to that because even though I was very bad at math in school, I'm very good at money and finance. And because numbers are just maybe a language, but the fundamental and the concepts and the formulas you apply are very universal. So the first thing about, I think, financial management is your in this was something that a professor told me very early in my career, that if you are employed, your basic earning should be twice your experience. If you're a 5-year experienced person, your salary should be about 10 lakhs. If you're into business, he told me about certain ROI frameworks. And therefore, the first principle in financial management is you should measure everything. If you don't measure, you can't manage. And a lot of people I come across who are earning very good money, I have zero savings. I have come across people who are earning 15,000 rupees a month. For example, I'll tell you, one of our helps in our society, who's like a handyman, Man Friday of the society. He does small chores, he washes cars, and he has a monthly income of about 30 to 35,000. He's got land, he sends his children to lexicon school, and he lives a very, very good life. And I'm saying good not from a social media good perspective, a good as in a very well-rounded life that he's spending on the right things. And that is when I realized financial management does not care about that it is applicable to only HNIs or people who earn a certain six-figure salary. Even if you make, say, like him, right, 35 or maybe 15 also, financial management can apply. And the first thing you need to start with measuring from two perspectives. One is, of course, inflow outflow, and the second is, in your perspective, do you have any milestone set? Again, this is a problem. If you look at most countries, people have no savings. In the pandemic, I saw so many businesses close, and these businesses were doing more than uh, you know uh, 20, 30 crores of business, and they have absolutely shut during the pandemic. And that shows that no matter how much you earn, if you are not measuring, if you're not investing, it would not work from a financial management parlance. And therefore, measuring is number one. Number two, structuring. Now, this is the uh, very contrasting approach that I saw, that the value of a corporate, the value of a company is important only when you structure it, when you use it properly. For example, when so just to answer the chat, I will be coming on the presentation in just 5 minutes from now, and then we will start. I'll ask you to share the screen. Coming back to structuring, as I practice, it's been about 7, 8 years now, and I worked with large companies. I understood that a small structuring measure can end up saving the company a few crores easily. A simple thing, I learned this, I think, 4 years back, where a person had loans from multiple banks, and he just clubbed it and got it in one bank. And through interest and principal and EMI saving, he made a saving of a few lakhs every month in EMI and a few crores in the entire loan amount. And that is when I realized that most of us will be taking maybe a home loan or a car loan, or having an insurance premium and all of that. It's extremely essential that we structure this properly. Again, the structuring will happen based on the kind of life you want to live, the kind of retirement you want to have, the kind of money you want to leave your children, the kind of freedom you want to experience, and all of that. So your structuring is extremely critical. One very important point that I have seen killing many people in terms of their financial freedom is debt. Please, so there is two types of debt. One debt is a debt which is depreciable debt. When you buy a car, it's a depreciable debt. The value of the car is going to go down, and God forbid if you end up buying a BMW or that early in your career with a 40, 50,000 EMI, the car's value decreasing every quarter, it's going to hurt you very much, even though it gives you some happiness at the start. And then is appreciable debt, like your house. A home loan which is reasonably bought in a certain average price would be a very positive debt, would be encouraging, your saving habit also. And the value of your property increases every year or every 3 5 years, because there is a real estate slowdown at the moment. So I would say go for appreciable debt to the as much as possible, and avoid depreciable debt at all. Here, I would like to recommend a movie to everybody called One Idiot. It's a very good movie of IDGI, where he talks about how small investments, SIPs, work to create a very good compounded number. So that's something that all of you can check out. And last is, before I go into the presentation, is you need to really monitor your portfolio and be extremely agile. A lot of people lose a lot of money in the share markets because they have never understood how it works. And one is, you just be simple, invest in mutual funds, that's fine. But most of us, if you are serious about wealth, if you're serious about managing your money properly, you need to keep a very close tab on your portfolio, keep changing it, keep revising it. And like I said, it's a subset of measuring. So this would be on a fundamental, broad level on financial management, on branding, and on legal compliances. Now coming to the topic of IP, where I talk about all this in a slightly detailed manner. I would request somebody to start the slides, please. Yeah, slide number 2, please. All right. This is my favorite quote. And this quote basically says that all of us have a limited time span. And in this limited time span, it is important for us to create something that will outlive us. For example, Michael Jackson today still appears in the top 5 richest celebrities. Why? Because the songs he created are still being heard, are still making revenue for the family, are still earning good income in terms of royalty income. And therefore, my point here is to make that most of us, the way we are brought up, we are told to trade our time for money. That is, work for 8 hours, get a salary, move on with your life. Or in a business, that you give us a product, give us a service, and in return you get money and you move on. These are the two methods. The people who are at the top of the pyramid, they understand something else, which is true creativity and true freedom does not begin until you actually start creating passive income. And for me, intellectual property is less of a law and less of a legal framework, but more of a passive income tool. And I'm going to share numerous examples with you of clients who are as young as 10 years old and as old as 70 years old, who have created these kind of passive incomes. And therefore, at the end of my presentation, my request at the start is, please sit with a notepad, write down the names I'm telling you, research about these, read more about this, because in the time span I have, I can only speak so much. So next slide, please. Now, please look at these pictures on the left, and this is why I got into intellectual property. Although my core area remains corporate law and foreign exchange management and all those laws, today 50 to 60% of my practice comes from intellectual property. On your left, you can see a girl who is just 11, Ishita, and she's written a book called Simran's Diary. It's available on Amazon. If you look at, and there are multiple examples I can give you, most of uh, these kind of authors, what was unique about Ishita and a couple of others who came, like who has written books on different topics, was when I was doing her copyright renewal agreement. And I realized that they are making royalty incomes from the sale of their book to the tune of a few lakhs. And although it was not much, I was very impressed that at such a early age, by creating a intellectual property, she has created a passive income for herself. And I was very impressed. And I said, why is this knowledge not being transferred? Because if you look at your own contact book, if you look at your own contact list, you will see that one or two people, or maybe zero, hold any patent or a copyright or any kind of design, any intellectual property. Now coming to the second picture on the right, which is of Haziq Kazi. Haziq is an interesting person. Again, just a 11-year-old. He created a device called Orvis. So Orvis is basically a cleaning device which you attach to the ship. You can see his design there. And as the ship moves forward, the cleaning device cleans the ocean. Now, you might be wondering, what is the value of this idea? Now, yeah, and one question has to come that why is innovation suddenly being spoken about so much? Why has it become such an important buzzword? And the answer is very simple. Earlier, if you wanted to innovate or to create a product or to create a business, you had to actually buy a piece of land, create infrastructure, create plant machinery, equipment, invest so much money, create a distribution channels, all of that. Today, all this heavy infrastructure is already created. I really like this line by Jeff Bezos where he says that Amazon was successful because of Microsoft, Dell, and many others who did a lot of heavy lifting. For example, for Amazon to work today, everybody needed to have a PC, computer, everybody needed to have a good phone, everybody needed a good internet connection. So the cables laid down by Google helped. There had to be a good logistics service provider. All of that was there, and hence Amazon worked. Today, why IP is being created so much, why we have so much innovation, is because the heavy infrastructure is already done. Today, if you have an idea of a mobile application or something like Orvis, you basically just have to hire a person, draw that idea on paper, register it, and somebody else might just want to work on it and take it from there. So Orvis, exactly that happened. He registered the design for the ship, and the design was taken by a lot of people, and it fetches him a very good amount. So Haziq is now a very popular face on speaking circuits. Is spoken at most of the TED big conferences, and I would request you to read more about Haziq. Next slide, please. Now, these three photos are also very interesting. In the very right, you will see a doctor, Dr. Devi Shetty. The pictures have got morphed somehow. Now, Dr. Devi Shetty is an interesting personality because he's the person who does a very low cost heart surgery or a cardio surgery, angioplasty. How does he manage this? So, if you ask me what is his, how much does he charge? He charges 10 rupees. And his hospital outlet, Narayana Rudale, is very popular. He does heart surgery or angioplasty at 10 rupees a person. And you might be wondering, this is a non-profit or this is a charitable outfit. The answer is no. He is profitable, he is growing very well. The way he charges this amount, I have to take you back to Ford Motors. Now, all of you know Ford, we've seen their cars, we've seen their movies also, Ford versus Ferrari. And there is one thing that's very critical for all of you to understand is Ford is not in the business of car making. Henry Ford was not known as the father of cars, he was known as the father of the assembly line system. And he registered the assembly line system as a patent to his name. And till today, he licenses the assembly line system to all other car manufacturers, bike manufacturers, and earns a royalty from that. This is very interesting. If you look at the balance sheet of Ford, you will see that most of the income comes from the intellectual property kind of revenue and less from sale of cars, spare parts, services, servicing. All of that is very less. Dr. Devi Shetty applied what he learned at Ford and as a metaphorical reference, and he applied that to heart surgery. He booked a big hall, invited a lot of people to come and be part. So 5 doctors entered, one gave anesthesia, moved on, gave anesthesia. So basically, like they did assembly line car surgery, he started doing assembly line heart surgery, car manufacturing to heart surgery. Time effective, cost effective, and it gave him the IP. He licenses this technique to all hospitals. One of the major hospitals is John Hopkins, which pays him like $1,000 for surgery, and that's why he's very profitable. Again, I want to try to tell you about the business models. The center picture, you can see me with Vivek, and Vivek is recently going to raise funds. So he's created a very good, bag which sort of molds with your spine. Vivek is from Nasik. He's an engineering student with Sandeep University. And he created a bag that curves with your spine. It changes the center of gravity and it causes less back pain. Now, what is the value of this concept? So the moment we file this as a patent, one of the procedural steps is it gets published. The moment it gets published, a lot of people in the area of bag manufacturing, they reached out to Vivek. They said that give us your design, we will sell it, and we will distribute it. And one of the largest companies, Wildcraft, reached out. Wildcraft can literally pay Vivek 6%, 10% of per sale per bag. Now, Wildcraft has a worldwide distribution network. They sell maybe 5,000 bags every month at an average cost of 1,500 to 2,000 rupees per bag. So you can do the math. Now, Vivek, if this was not there, the licensing culture, the IP culture, would have to make his bag himself. He would have to hire or contractually hire somebody, go to China, give it to them, distribute the bag, market the bag, create a company, so many things. But today, this is a very easier route that you create an IP and the people who already have an infrastructure, they sort of borrow your IP and take it from there. And the last picture you can see of Sanket on the left, very, very interesting. Created a mobile app called Benefito. You can all check it out. And the Benefito app basically applies discounts as you shop and did very well. So I remember he had come to me with an idea, and today is a very good company. He's created multiple versions of the app now, multiple apps competing to that app also, and he's doing fabulously well. Which brings me to the point that today capital, contacts, experience, all of that are myths that you do not need while doing business or while going into any kind of knowledge entrepreneurship. The industry has absolutely changed and it has become a knowledge economy over an infrastructure economy. Next slide, please. Before I go here, I want to speak a little about the knowledge economy point. Look at the top 5 richest people or top 5 biggest companies today. You will notice that these companies are all tech companies, more or less are tech companies. If you leave the Louis Vuitton and the Zara out of it, most of them are tech. Now, why tech? If you look at a company like Facebook, which is so valuable, or if you look at Uber or these startups which are unicorns now, you will notice that they don't have any physical assets. Uber does not own cars, Airbnb does not own house, Facebook does not own, basic, it owns data itself. So why are these companies valued so high? And the answer is very simple. They are valued based on their algorithm, based on their source code of how it works in the background. That's how the value is there. And not just these companies, even the Indian startups like Flipkart and Oyo and all of this. Which brings me to a point that your IP is what is going to drive your business and therefore it creates value and not any physical infra. And now we have come to a point where Airbnb is more valued than, or Oyo is more valued than all other hotel chains put together. It's more valuable than Hyatt. So imagine the kind of difference. And therefore, this is the kind of entrepreneurship that one should pursue. The left picture that you see, Good Dot, it comes from a company that has created veg meat. Meat that is created from vegetable waste, from vegetable discharge, from wet waste. And it comes with a very good story that the person who saw slaughtering once, he decided to create this company. And today, even though he came from a first background, the company immediately got acquired. And once it got acquired, now you will find it at all departmental stores. We were going to get Mr. Modi for the inauguration of this company, being the most famous vegetarian. But the fact again remains that one recipe, one process created sort of lasts a long time. On the right side, you will see a restaurant. Now, this is not an ordinary restaurant. This is an underground restaurant. And one of our clients, Mr. Shah, had visited Taiwan, where in a mine, after the mining is done, one entrepreneur decided to create a fine dining restaurant. So you go to Taiwan, you take a lift, you go down. You go down for 30 minutes, and then you go and have a dining experience under the world. 30,000 per person, so you can try it out. So when my client tried this, he liked it. He came back to India and he registered this. Now, this is interesting. What do you mean by registered? Registered means he got civil engineers, architects, he put it on a framework, he put it on a blueprint, and then he registered it under IP as a design. Now, this is interesting. The moment he registered it and it got published and it got registered, a lot of people reached out to him to buy this from him. Now, how much did he make from this? He made about 55 crores from this, and the registration fee was not even a few thousands. Why was this possible? You know, the Ruia family, who are into multiple things. One of the things they are into the Market City also, the Phoenix malls. They are going to implement this now at the Bombay Mall at Lower Parel, where you will find an underground restaurant where they are, going to go under the basement parking also and create this. So basically, just like you registered domain names and then waited for somebody to acquire that domain name, people are doing that with intellectual property. And this was a very big eye opener for me, that a lot of people are registering IP not from the perspective of actually creating it, but from the perspective of blocking it so that somebody else can acquire. Next, please. Another example I can give you of is of Moodle. Now, Moodle is a company that is a learning management system. Before e-learning and all this, virtual communication became the norm, Moodle had come out with raise your hand feature long back, and Moodle had patented the raise your hand feature. So basically, in Zoom you have it, Google Meet you have it, Microsoft Teams you have it. Moodle had it long back. When these apps eventually came, Byju's came, Google Meet came, Zoom came, they all wanted to use this app. Now, do they have the software developers to create it? Yes. Do they have the money to create it? Yes. Do they have the expertise to create it? Yes. What stops them? That IP stops them. So IP sort of gives you that legal monopoly, is the point I want to make. And because of that one feature that Moodle had registered, it is now that has become its primary revenue source driver. One another funny example before I give you is the example of Nirma. Nirma is a company, it's a detergent company. I think all of you know about it. What is interesting about Nirma is the jingle song, that washing powder Nirma, the song that is there. It was written by a father of a student of mine. The student was 60 years old at Tata Institute of Communication, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and he had written the song in 1965 when Nirma was just starting. Karsan Bhai Patel and they were friends, so he was writing. Now, since he was educated abroad and he had a good knowledge of IP, that time he did not sell the song. He said that you give me a rental, give me a 500 rupees per year and increase 10% every year. That's it. And Karsan Bhai agreed. Now, the beautiful point here is the song is still being used by Nirma as it is. We can all sing it, it's so popular. What is interesting is the life of a copyright is 60 years after the death of the author. Now the person is still alive, he's in his very, very late 90s, and he receives royalty from that song even today. And the family is earning a few lakhs every month for a song that was written in 1965 for Karsan Bhai. Now this logic applies in a movie like Sholay also, which still earns 6 crores for the Sippy family. Or the sitcom Friends. Netflix recently paid $100 million to the Warner Brothers and to the creator of Friends. The people who played Friends, right? Ross, Rachel, Chandler, all of these, still make $20 million every year because we still watch it, we still enjoy it, ads are still placed, and that is the power of IP. Creating something good once and it's sort of giving you revenue again and again. Next point, please. Next slide. I spoke about Ford already. Yes. More examples on IP. So on the left, you will see Dr. Vaidya, who is a very senior homeopathic doctor, who was in Pune itself in Karve Road. At his height of his practice, he used to see 300, 400 patients every day. When he was invited by the king of UAE, King Zayed, to treat his wife, he was given a red carpet treatment. Chartered plane was sent. He went and Just before he could treat her, King Zayed and his team told him that you can't touch her. As per our Islamic, rituals, only the husband can touch the wife. And the doctor was very furious. He said, "How do I take the pulse? How do I, do the diagnosis?" And at that moment, his creativity was so good that he tied a thread on the wrist of the lady, the wife, and through the knot of the thread, he understood the pulse. And he did a lot of such innovations, which are now become very popular, which are used by countries where getting the medical equipment is not very easy. So that's Dr. Vaidya for you. Sadly, in India, medical practices are not registered, and therefore, whatever he taught his students was there. After that, when he died, he took all his knowledge with him. Glenmark also created a very good pharma drug, which we were a part of in the patenting, where you just take the drug once in the morning and it gives you effect 3 times. This is so useful for people who are old, who forget to take their medicines, or who are bedridden, who can't get up again and again. You just take the medicine once, and therefore, this is the beauty of IP, the way it works in terms of problem solving. Next, please. Alibaba.com is the left. You see that it's a clear case of domain name squatting, where a Canadian student had booked this domain for about $6 to $7, and Alibaba, when it became very popular and it wanted to go global, it had to buy the domain name from the student for about 40 crores, from $6 to 40 crores Indian rupees. It's absolutely insane. If you look at Maricom, this I have given you to make you understand how IP works. Even without there is value creation, there is value addition. To give you an example, if I'm Karan Johar and I'm watching Maricom fight in the World Boxing Championship, and I understand that this is a very good story, right, to make a movie, to make a biopic, I will send my team to her house, buy the rights to make the movie, and give her 25 lakhs rupees in against the rights. Now, I will never make the movie. I will call Rakesh Omprakash Mehra, tell him that please make this movie because you are good at making biopics. And Rakesh Omprakash Mehra will pay Karan Johar about 50 crores to buy the rights from him. So look at the growth. He will make the movie and the movie will make 100 crores. Priyanka Chopra, who actually plays Mary Kom, earns 7 crores and Mary Kom herself earns 25 lakhs, which goes to show that IP illiteracy can be extremely economically detriment, which brings me to that financial management perspective that ignorance of law and ignorance of all of this cannot be an excuse. You will lose a lot of economic value in life, in transactions, and in deals, which is not really, smart. Next slide, please. Now, this is again very interesting. On the left, you see Bhushan Kumar and T Series. It was started by his father, Gulshan Kumar. Now, T Series is a very good company in terms of what it does. Please understand that if I am a artist, if I am a music composer, if I am a person who creates a lot of art, I cannot track where all it is being used, where all people are playing it without giving me a royalty. T Series does that for me, and therefore, as A.R. Rahman, I can focus on creating my music, and T Series will collect the royalty on my behalf and collect some commission. So I really hope there is a T Series for artists, for painters, for all kinds of inventors, and they will start earning their dues very easily. So they are doing a great service to the artist. In the right, you will see Walt Disney, a very famous person, and Disney has a very, very strong IP policy, and that is why, as a fun fact, you will never see Happy Birthday to You movie because it's owned by Disney, and the Disney will charge you $1500 every minute you play this song. So most of us will refrain from using it. Next slide, please. So this was, a big round through about on IP, on what are the fundamentals and why is it such an important part. And now I'll go to a bit, specifics into some real fundamentals that you need to understand from a compliance perspective, brand perspective, and also financial management perspective. Next slide, please. Uh, One thing that came to me as a big shock uh, when I started practicing into IP was that I thought the countries which are very rich must be the most innovative, right? Even in today, if I ask you that, what do you need to create an invention, you will usually say, I need money, which is wrong. So if you look at the most innovative economies, you will notice that Switzerland usually is at the top. Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Denmark, Finland usually are there. These are not rich countries. US's will be at the bottom. Countries like Japan will not be there. So it's not about money, is what I understood. It's about culture. So if you go to Switzerland, which is the world's most innovative, and you see the World Intellectual Property head office is also at Switzerland. Why are they so innovative? So Switzerland has a policy of paying a very good social being in a rat race that you want to earn money, pay bills, think about your child's education all the time. Don't do all that. We will pay you 1 lakh rupees every month. You focus on problem solving. You focus on creating new innovations. And therefore, most people in Switzerland are in Denmark, in Sweden, in Israel. Israel is a great example. Are focused exactly on creating new products. And that's why they are extremely innovative. And therefore, it is a cultural change. In India also, we are very innovative. If you look at the Mitti coal invention, if you look at, there is a very good TED talk given by Professor Anil Gupta, who created the Honeybee Network, who talks about a lot of frugal innovations. You will see that India has a lot of innovations, small, lot of them, on a day-to-day basis also. And therefore, we are very, the only thing we don't have is, we do not have the ability to scale the innovation and make it a big business. This was the main difference between the Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison, where Nikola Tesla came out with a lot of inventions, but he could not productize them and take it to the market. Whereas Thomas Edison, on the other hand, could actually make it into a product, give it a good brand name, price it properly, take it to the market, and give a good service support also. And therefore, the company he created, General Electric, is today, even today, one of the most profitable, one of the companies that's filing the highest number of patents. It's one of the most innovative as well. If you go to any hospital, most of the equipment you will see is will be from General Electric. So it's fantastic. So yeah, this was some eye-opener statistic I wanted to give you. Next, please. Yeah, now this is a big misconception. A lot of people confuse between innovation and invention. The difference between both of them is the difference of a South Pole and a North Pole. Innovation is when you build on something existing, and invention is when you create something new from zero. Now, when you replace, a lot of people also have a misconception that invention means when you replace a bulb, a candle with a bulb, it will become an invention. Or you replace a horse with a car, it becomes an invention. That's not right. Invention can be something that's a small incremental innovation also. For example, if you notice, there is, when we staple, uh, there is one person who said that I'm not able to understand when the staple is getting over, and therefore he painted the last few staples yellow. So the moment it was a yellow staple, he understood that he needed to change it. Now, such a simple thing. He sold this to companies like Stedler and Kangaroo, this concept, and now is earning a very good amount through the licensing fees through this small technology, small basic idea. And therefore, I wanted to tell you that for you to come out with an innovative or an inventive idea, it need not be radical. It can be incremental. A small change, a small improvement could be a very good invention. Next. Why is it called intellectual property? Answer is very simple. It satisfies all definitions of property. If you look at, can it be bought, can it be sold, can it be rented,
Can it be assigned? Can you give it under a will? Can you, all of what a property can do, IP can do. The best part is the only thing you can't do is touch and feel it. That's it. It's a certificate that you get. That's about it. Other than that, I think this is more valuable than actual physical property. And that's why it's called property. Next. Now, why is it needed? Now, I think this is an important slide for me to focus on a little bit. One is it's very tough to come out with an invention. Even if I tell you today that I'll give you unlimited money, can you come out with a cure for coronavirus? The answer will be, very shaky. You'll not be sure, and therefore it is a very good incentive to people who are inventors that if you have created something of very good value, uh, the government gives you a protection so that you recover your investment, you recover your sunk cost, you recover your salaries that you have paid, so much money you have spent on trial and error, all that can be recovered. So it's an incentive. Number two, it gives you a very good valuation. Like I said, companies which have IP. So Vijay Mallya, we took it as a bad brand example, but as a good, he's a very good entrepreneur because wherever you go in the world, rarely will you see an Indian brand. You go to Paris, you go to the very Champs, the main street at Paris, the shopping street, you will not see many Indian brands, any Indian brands. You go to Hong Kong, you will not see Indian brands. Go to the US, Times Square, you will not see Indian brands. But if you look at if you're in Amsterdam or somewhere else and you walk into a bar, there is a good chance you might find Kingfisher there, which goes to show that brands. I mean, he was very good at brand creation, Mr. Mallya. So, as an entrepreneur, he might not be very good, but as a brand creator, he did a very good job. And therefore, brands bring a very good value to a business. So that's about the second point. The third, of course, is if you find somebody copying your brand or copying your IP or copying it, without your permission, you can always pursue them legally, recover royalty from them, and economically monetize your intellectual property. So that can be done. Next slide, please. I will not go into the specifics because the topic for today was more of generic marketing and legal compliances. But yes, these are the various types of IP that the government grants in India. Internationally, there are a few more. But just to give you quickly that if you create a product or a process that is unique, that is new, you get a patent. If you write something, you paint something, if you create something of artistic value, you will get a copyright. If you create a logo or a name or a mark that distinguishes you from somebody else, you get a trademark. If you create something that is aesthetically very valuable, like a Bisleri bottle looks very different from other bottles, or a Volkswagen Polo looks very different from other cars. So that's a design registration. And therefore, different IP will be given for different kinds of creations. So that's about a gist. Next, please. Now, again, there are certain fundamentals that I wanted to focus on here. Is a lot of people have a confusion that IP means that I will get a patent or and I will start, money will be coming to me. But the answer is not that. IP gives you a negative right. It's not like you get a license and you start driving, or you get a passport and you start traveling. It is like owning a piece of land and putting a board, trespassers will be prosecuted. What you're doing basically is you're not allowing others to use it. So it is a negative right, is what you need to understand very, you need to pursue. For example, if I am an author and I feel that a crossword in Pune is selling my book without paying me any money, I need to find that out. That's why I told you that T series is playing a very important role here. In terms, of course, it has to be useful. Here, there are two concepts that are very critical that I need to explain to you. One is the concept of first filer. In case of patents specifically, if you invent a product or a process, it's important that you are the first filer, because in law, it is the first filer who's treated as the inventor, not the person who invents first. So it's basically a if you snooze, you lose kind of a game. So that's important. In case of trademarks and copyrights, on the other hand, the game is more from a prior user perspective. If you're the first user, you will get the rights. You don't have to even register it. So that's about prior art and first filer. Like I said, lot of IP today works on paper. People create a lot of inventions on paper, register it, and then wait for somebody to buy it from them. This is known as a provisional registration. When you don't have a sample, when you don't have a prototype, when you don't have a beta version of your software or your invention. Where when you create a prototype, when you create a sample and you submit it to the government, your registration becomes complete and you get a final registration. The term of registration in each case of intellectual property is different. In some cases, it goes to 10 years. In some cases, it goes to 60 years after the death of the author. Or in some cases, 30 years. You can renew it in most cases. So that's about all of this. Now, two beautiful things about this is one, India is a member of a lot of treaties, a lot of international conventions where so India has signed the Patent Cooperation Treaty. We have signed the Madrid Protocol. We have signed the Brussels Protocol. That if you register something in India, automatically you'll get protection in many other international countries. So that is very useful for inventors, especially if you create something that's geography agnostic. Think you create a mobile application, for example. Uh, it does not have a geography limit. If it goes on the Google Play Store or the Apple Play Store, anybody can just download it and use it. So it's extremely important that you register in places where it is required. So from a compliance perspective, one important point here is it's very important that you register in those countries where you have clients. One of our clients, from Goregaon in Bombay, Imami, it's a big company. They wanted us to register a fairness screen, men's fairness screen, and internationally they wanted to register. I told them no, because internationally there's no point of registering it, because uh, fair skinned countries like US, Canada, Europe, all of these countries will never use uh, all of this, so it doesn't make sense. So you should pick and choose the countries where you want to register. If you're a product company, it's very important that you register in product strong companies like Taiwan, China, Luxembourg, and countries which have very good manufacturing capabilities. So that's about registering. It's also important in a big way that you should only register your IP or register any of this if you're able to track it. For example, one of our clients is also a Pune-based PNG, the Gadgil family, who creates this Maharaja Har every year. Now they create this Maharaja Har and they came to us. They said, let's register a design. Saurabh is a good friend. And I said, no. And since they maintain multiple lawyers, all of them said, yes, yes, we should register. I was the only one who saying no. They asked me what happened, why not? The answer I gave them was that if a Chennai jeweler copies it or a jeweler based in Kolkata or Delhi copies it, do we have the mechanism to track the copying? If the answer is no, why are we registering? Because IP should be looked at with an ROI perspective. If you can't track it, don't register it. Just for a certificate which will hang on your wall, it's a very wrong mechanism. And this is the exact flaw which I saw in the legal system here, that outside there are actually dedicated technology transfer offices where inventors can go, give their technology, and then the office will then give it to the industry. Here we don't. I have so many people I know who are sitting with patents, who are sitting with inventions, but nobody is using them in the market, and they think that all the money that they spent on IP is a waste. That is a very sad case of misinformation, in my opinion. So I think I've covered most of the points now. Next slide, please. So in terms of cases, you will notice that IP is a B2B game. If I am Chetan Bhagat, I cannot take an action against, the seller on FC Road who's selling on the road to people on his own book, because if I send him a notice, what will he pay me? So IP is a B2B game. I can send a notice to Crossword, to Landmark Books, to all of that, but not to random individuals, poor, those kind of people. And therefore, Apple and Samsung keep fighting all the time. No, so IP usually was very popular in the tech industry and the pharma industry, but now it has become popular in, content also, thanks to Netflix and all these OTT platforms. I know so many of my friends from the FTII, which is very close from my college at ILS, and they were sitting idle. They did not have work. They did not have jobs, and they had created a lot of good small films, documentaries. They were not going anywhere in life. The moment all of these platforms came, their documentaries got acquired. They got good money. Now Netflix and many others have given them yearly contracts to produce 2 films every year and all of that. So yeah, I think the shift is now happening, that we are going towards the non-infra heavy sectors also. Next slide, please. So these were basically some international treaties that we have signed. Like I said, that India is doing very good in terms of its IP protection. We do not send IP disputes to courts. We send them to IP tribunals, and therefore the judgment is very fast. If there is an IP case, you can expect that the judgment will come within 3 to 6 months, not 15, 10, 5 years. So that's really good. The Niti Aayog, which is a policy think tank of the government headed by the 1987 officer, Mr. Amitabh Kant, is also doing great job on creating these kind of innovation frameworks. I am very lucky to be working with organizations like the Mumbai University, Niti Aayog, and a few others, the Ministry of Youth Affairs, where we are trying to create an IP capability among the youth so that not all of them start focusing on getting degrees and being very unemployed and frustrated, but rather create such inventions, solve a lot of problems in society, and also monetize. When they create a solution, we are able to give them the monetary benefit also, so that even if they have any materialistic goals, even those goals can be fulfilled. Next slide, please. So yeah, so one question I always used to ask myself as a young student is why am I so fascinated by the West? And when I say West, I mean the US. Why does everybody want to leave the country and settle abroad? The biggest achievement in the country is leaving the country, which is sad. And earlier, I used to think it is about earning more or a better standard of living, and all these, functional. I'm not say functional, shallow points. But then I understood when I traveled abroad and I interacted with people and some of my relatives, I understood that when you earn in pounds, you spend in pounds, and therefore the net saving is not much. When you, in terms of health, I know a very rich family relatives of mine who stay in the US but cannot hire a maid to help them, and everything has to be done by themselves, and they're not very young, so it becomes a little tough for them. And now they're again moving back to our country. So the real reason for brain drain was actually the laws. The laws in the US, in Europe, in terms of privacy, data, IP are very strong. Slowly, we are looking at that. We are improving, but most of the brain drain happens. And I'm talking about brain drain where people who are engineers and doctors, I'm talking about skilled brain drain, not people who are going outside just for the glamour part of it, the skilled brain drain. So that's happening mostly because of uh, the laws are not very strong here, because we copied all the older laws from UK because you were a colony of the UK, and the newer laws we took from the US. And when we copied a lot of these laws, we forgot to put many things, or we did not customize them properly to the Indian standards or to the Indian public, and therefore it created a lot of problem. A couple of new developments that are happening, which you might find very interesting, is we are filing something known as an aroma mark now. Aroma mark is we are trademarking a smell. So KFC did this in their main store, where when you enter a KFC, you get a certain smell, right? So that smell is now registered as a trademark, and a lot of people are now doing it. We are having a 4D kind of a movie experience where we have 3D till now, right? 4D is basically where if a car is going fast, you will be able to smell the rubber. If the car meets with an accident, the glass will fall on you. If there is a lot of fire, you'll feel warm. You'll feel like fire is there next to you. That's a 4D experience already there in China. In India, there are, I think, couple of theaters which are planning to do this very soon, PVR, where you will feel as if you are a part of the movie, living the movie with the cast. So that is going to create a lot of IP opportunities. And yeah, so one interesting question for you, what I always give is you need to understand in terms of why Switzerland is the most innovative and why it is also doing so well on the scale of happiness and other human parameters. The answers is very good. If you are interested, I can give you the answer if you write to me or mail me or text me or something. But I leave it up to you. Next, please. Next slide. I think we are almost around the conclusion. So I think covered most of this. That the shift to knowledge-based industry. One important point I want to make here is uh, many people have been kept away from business because of the corruption angle. And one thing that has happened very well since I joined the profession in 2013 to today is a lot of people interaction has been taken out. I remember when I used to work with Kamaljeet ma'am, there was so much of human interaction with government officers, with government officials. And the moment you bring a person in the equation, the corruption will start, red tape will start, all of that will start. But the moment you remove the person and bring a technology, it becomes very efficient. And therefore, today, in all of what I discussed, it is very nice to see that most of the things are now technology driven rather than person driven. They are process driven. And I don't remember the last time I interacted with a government official face to face or on call. It is mostly through emails or some ticket you are raising, those things. So that's amazing. The second is a lot of lobby was created that patent agent can do the search, only patent agent can do this. And now what we are doing is we are going from a culture where which was dependent on a professional to a culture where the inventor can do everything. And I'm very happy for this because even we don't like doing this procedural administrative work. Even we would like to focus more on drafting the petitions and drafting the applications, doing work which involves a lot of application of mind rather than work which is procedural. So people who are in their early stages of the career, please note that most of the careers or work which is procedural, which is does not have enough application of mind, which can be put into steps and if and why logics, all of that will be given to bots, to robotic process automation, and to artificial intelligence. And whatever you're learning today might not be even implemented 3 years from now. And therefore, I request all of you to create skills that are not easily autom it can't be just given to a robot at the end of the day. Because I have seen large firms going absolutely clueless. For example, if you look at a chartered accountant, a best chartered accountant can do maybe 5,000 companies as clients and do a 10 crore revenue maybe a yearly. But there is a company called HNR Block which did 16 lakh returns with a staff strength of 3 people. And I just thought, how is this possible? It is because they're using technology, they're using AI. If you look at Uber, Uber operates more than 30,000 rides in Pune every day, and they have one staff in Pune, one staff. So we are going to move into a economy which is very gig driven. We will not have permanent jobs, monthly salaries. We will have projects. Do a project, get paid. That kind of a work, gig economy, just like Swiggy delivery boys have. And we are going to have a lot of free time going forward. And in this free time, I request that even we follow the Switzerland culture of focusing our attention, time, and energy on problem solving, and to create things that will outlast and outlive us. So I think that should my concluding note. Next slide, please. Yes, so if you're in case you are interested to read more, you can read, you can go to all these sites. I can share, of course, this recording is available for you. I can share some notes from mine on the compliances and the financial structuring point separately. So just let me know. Point number 4 is very close to my heart. My personal professional inspiration is Professor Shamnath Bashir, who started that, who was driving. Sadly, we lost him this year. And yeah, so it's a very, very good site. All the cases that I shared with you, 100 more cases you will find on Spicy IP. So please feel free to visit all of these. Next slide. All right, so you can close the slide sharing now. And I don't know if you can take any questions. I'll be happy to answer.
Yes, we are open for questions. If anyone wants to ask, can ask. Please feel free. So do we have any questions? So I myself had one question regarding the patent publication. For some instance, if a person patents an idea in a particular country, for example, if I patent my idea in India itself, so will it be valid around or across the whole globe, or should I patent the idea in each and every country?
Yeah, so good question. So like I said, right, if you create a mobile application and you get a software patent, I recommend that you get it internationally. So there is a provision that you can file an international application and register it in all 190 countries in one shot. That's one option. And the other option is if you create something like I told you, fairness claim, you should register it in all dark skinned countries like India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Africa, maybe. So you have to be very strategic. The first part of your question is if you only register it in India, your protection will be limited to India. So because IP is jurisdictional. So you only get protection in that area, that jurisdiction. So yeah, you need to be registering in places based on whether you will have clients there or not.
Okay, so if it's a technology-driven patent, it's good to go international.
Yeah, because technology is, for example, if you look at the apps that you're using on your phone, most of them are not Indian apps.
Yes.
Most of them have servers outside India. The data that they are collecting is going outside India. And if Indian courts have to pass any judgment, you know why Netflix gets all these movies which have a lot of bad words and these scenes, adult scenes, is because Netflix does not have a CBFC process, certification process. So when Anurag Kashyap wants to release a movie, he will not put it through Indian, theaters. Because it will go through the CBFC. A lot of scenes will be edited. A lot of bad words will be beeped off. But on Netflix, it will go straight through. So a lot of people are preferring OTT platforms because OTT platforms have absolutely no filter, which is a good and a bad thing at the same time.
Okay, so thank you. Any other questions, guys? Okay, so I guess we are good to go to the vote of thanks.
You can just check on FB if somebody is asking, maybe.
Yes, sir, sure.
So as you check, two very good pieces of advice that I had got and I stand by before I conclude. One is it's a lot of people now, especially in their early teens, try to master a lot of things, and this is not the way to uh, building a very strong brand or credibility or expertise or success. Try to focus on one thing and go super deep. this is for the people who are young, hyper specialize. Because if you look at the medical profession, our grandfather's generation who used to do MBBS, a full physician doctor, like full body physician. His son became a cardiologist, a heart doctor. His son, this is my generation, my friend who was a doctor, Akshay. Akshay is a pediatric cardiologist. So he's gone even further. He's a heart specialist of children. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, whatever on your profession you are, do not be a kirana store and offer everything. Do not be a generalist, be a specialist. That's very important. And one is uh, the second would be do not be in a profession where you are competing with dinosaurs. For example, uh, if you are an engineer today and if you decide to be in software consulting or software development, you are competing with the likes of TCS and Infosys and Wipro, and you will be very frustrated by the time you reach their level in 20, 30 years. Rather, you'd be in the field of machine learning or AI or blockchain or something of the emerging technologies and try to become a dinosaur yourself. Why I'm sharing this is, in the first case, when I chose to specialize in IP, it really paid dividends. In first and in the second, when I speak about not competing with dinosaurs, I knew that corporate law, criminal law, civil law already have a lot of senior practitioners, and therefore I did not choose to go there, but come into IP, and therefore I avoided the dinosaurs in my field. And in my journey, I'm trying to build cred as soon as possible. A very
So
good.
we also have a question that is it important to have a legal mentor in field of business or entrepreneurship?
The legal mentor concept sounds funny. You just have to have a mentor in all areas of your life. In my right, I had Dr. Kamaljeet as my mentor, my first professional boss and mentor, and after her, many people also. And mentors just save you a lot of years, 5 years, 10 years easily. The only thing is you need to be an empty glass. You need to be egoless. You need to share everything with your mentor. And now you don't even have to have a physical mentor who is, you need to talk to. You can virtually talk to them. In fact, your mentor need not be alive. You can talk to books. You can read books and get mentorship from them. But it's very important that you have or regularly learn from somebody who is at a position where you want to be. Otherwise, your own journey will be very slow. If you are your own reference point, it's not fun. So yeah. So for example, in terms of personal branding, I really liked the personal branding of a certain lawyer, Mr. Arvind Datar, the way he conducts himself, the way he argues, and all of that. I tried reaching out to him on email a couple of times. He's a very senior lawyer in India, and he immediately replied saying that, Kunal, feel free to email me and I'll respond. And he responds within 24 hours, long responses. In even college, I remember we used to write to Bill Gates that please come to our college fest when I was in Nest Wadia and later in ILS also. And what I liked is uh, he used to reply saying his office that sorry, we are not available. He does not have an India tour. Similarly, we had written to Mr. Murthy once that please come to our college fest because the email ID was available freely online. And Mr. Murthy actually came. So basically, what I'm trying to say to the person is reach out to the person, and you will be surprised that most of the people are just waiting to share their knowledge and experience with you. So, yeah.
Okay, so thank you.
Sir, I have one question. If I'm having a new startup and I'm planning to spend maximum of 10,000, and if the startup is looking into some technology driven designs or any other copyrights, everything, so what would be the small amount of the registrations that I have to spend to get this patented, or whether it should be, if it is designs for copyrights or anything for IP registrations, what would be the average cost that a person should spend?
Okay. A good question. I think this is a practical, question where people will see the budget and then take a decision. IP will cost, so in terms of government fee, it's very less. The fees essentially increases because of the number of people involved. Like in a mobile app software patent, you will need to have a person who specializes in that technology, in that coding language. There will be a person who, we will be drafting it from a legal perspective. A patent document is essentially a business legal techno document. So it's a lot of people involved. And since all of these people are experts, the price shoots up. One thing that we do as a firm is I always got a lot of help from a lot of people as I started the profession. And I said that I'll pass it on. So in our firm, anybody who's under 25, we do not charge them a professional fee. So whatever government fee is payable, that is what needs to pay. If you ask me for an average amount of registration, trademarks and copyrights will be about 15-20,000, and a patent should go about 40-50. On an average, if you talk about Indian registration point of view, internationally it will increase, right? It will almost be multiplied by 3 when you go international. And the answer is very simple because the currency changes international, and India is not doing well as against a pound, for example. So internationally it becomes expensive, and India, I told you, that is the average number of costs that you need.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, so moving on to the felicitation part. So from Rotaract District 3131, we have a small felicitation for you. A felicitation. Moving to vote of thanks. Advocate Mr. Kunal Sangpa, sir, our most esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of Rotaract District 3131 and entire fraternity present here today, and on my own behalf, very hearty vote of thanks to our speaker for taking time from your respect to impart knowledge regarding financial management, importance of intellectual property rights, and about marketing. I am sure that all the attendees present over here lot to take away from this session. Last but not the least, Zoom for providing us platform to connect. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your session.
Thank you very much.